Resilient by Valerie Bell. Read by Rose Melick. Part 2. The What. Shift our focus to disciple making. Chapter 5. Fire Carriers. In Cormac McCarthy's novel, No Country for Old Men, Sheriff Bell remembers that his father would carry the embers from the campfire in one camp to the next in an animal horn. It was a tradition passed to the cowboys from the Native American Indians. The fire carrier was important to Western life. The fire carrier brought hope. Fire chased the darkness from the western skies. The night was not so ominous when a fire was burning. The fire carrier helped continue the mission. Hunters could keep hunting, continuing their search far from home. Cowboys could keep protecting their herds from predators. The fire carrier sustained life. Food could be cooked and made edible and become life-giving. So too today, stories, the fires we carry to each other, hold a special place in our lives. In the lines of a story, we can find healing, life, and light for our journeys. And so was such a story. It began very simply, but it lit up the earth for thousands of years with its hopeful truth. It transformed everything. The fire it carried still burns brightly today. This is that story's opening line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That was fire. In a pagan, wildly senseless, brutally hopeless world, that story carried fire. It meant we weren't random beings. We were wanted, created, and pursued by God. Here was meaning. The story continued. Man turned away, but God didn't extinguish the flame and give us over to darkness. Just the opposite. He called us his children, not just his creations. He loved us, and we still turned our faces from him. Over and over, that pattern repeated. But then a new part of the story lit up the world. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. John 1:1-5, NIV, 1984. With those beginning words to his gospel, John carried fire to the world. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. I can barely imagine how those words pierced the pagan heart with hope. The disciples and the apostles of the early church carried that fire to Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. For centuries, mothers and fathers of all skin colors and nationalities have gathered their children around their knees and breathed a fire of God's love into their young hearts with that same story. Preachers have carried that fire in their sermons. Missionaries have carried that fire story to the ends of the earth. But the fire was often resisted. The story attacked. Ancient Rome tried to silence the fire-carrying story of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. Its leaders persecuted the fire carriers and put them to death by crucifixion, stoning, the sword, and flames. Christian tradition holds that all the disciples of Jesus, except John, died martyrs' deaths. Early Christian fire carriers were torn to pieces by wild animals to the roar of bloodthirsty crowds. But all the power and terror of ancient Rome could not put out that fire. The story of God's love still burns brightly today, and ancient Rome is only a crumbling ruin of what it once was. The Jesus story turned the world upside down. Nazi Germany tried to silence the story of Jesus. Fire carriers like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and thousands of other Christian leaders died in Nazi concentration camps, executed by death squads, gassed, starved, and worked to death. Still, the evil darkness of Nazi Germany could not put out the Christian fire. Today, God's love burns brightly, while Nazi Germany is defeated, relegated to a shameful, repugnant chapter of human history. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. John 1:4-5, NIV, 1984. In my childhood, the Russians were always coming. Children of my generation were taught to duck and cover under our desks for air raid drills. Russia, with its enforced secular anti-God, state is everything, death pogroms of Stalin and others were a force of darkness sweeping the world. Christian fire carriers were driven underground and subjected to state terror. But today, the Berlin Wall is torn down, and Russia is no longer the threat it once was. In him was life, and that life was the light of all men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. At so many points in world history, the fire could have been extinguished, the story buried and forgotten. But generation after generation of fire carriers kept the gospel ember burning. Fire carriers like Peter and Paul, John and Stephen, St. Augustine, St. Patrick, George Whitefield, John Wesley, D.L. Moody, William Carey, Amy Carmichael, and Billy Graham carried the ember of the gospel story that continues to light up the world. However, these fire carriers were not alone. Though their individual embers burned brightly, they were easily snuffed out. But there was a church. The church fanned the flames of the fire carriers and carried the embers to the entire world. The church, those Christ followers with spine and heart, refused to be silenced, refused to be driven underground, refused to stop carrying the fire. At great risk and sacrifice, the church spoke truth into their generations and were God's love to the world. That is the world's most awesome story. It's still the fire that lights up the world. It's the story whose flames we protect and stoke today. The church, led by the fire carriers of our generation, must proclaim God's truth and love. We must proclaim it peacefully, persistently, clearly, fearlessly, and with boldness. We must proclaim it so it lights a fire in our world. Why? Because in him was life, but that light was the light of all men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it. We can face the future fearlessly. God is writing this story, and it is still fire. In my neighborhood, we have an email chain where local neighbors can post information or ask each other for help to find plumbers, remove skunks, locate lost cats and dogs, warn each other about mice sightings in local restaurants, or advertise for upcoming garage sales. It's all very Americana and quite charming in a neighborly kind of way. It's also a good feel for the pulse of what's happening in the areas of public opinion. I am not a very active member, but recently a conversation took a direction I knew I needed to join. I confess I wanted to avoid it, but a convicting voice spoke to me, saying, "How can you expect to teach others, especially children, to have spine and heart if you avoid these kinds of conversations yourself?" This is how it began. Neighbor 1. Does anyone know what the crowd is about downtown? Neighbor 2. They're protesting abortion. 2 people responded with a thumbs up. Neighbor 3. It's their right to assemble and protest, of course, but I really wish they didn't include their kids in these demonstrations. Child labor laws should be against a law to force young kids to further a specific agenda, no matter what it is. 10 people responded with a thumbs up. Neighbor 4. I agree. 3 people responded with a thumbs up. Boom. This is what happened next. Neighbor 5. I hope everyone who thinks this is against child labor laws is also against children marching for gay pride, gender equality, and so on. Just saying. 15 people responded with a thumbs up. Why were there 15 people, including me, so silent up until now? I finally decided to join in, but only after neighbor 5 led the way. My response: your protection of children in regard to child labor laws seems ironic. Wouldn't children be better protected if we extended this care to their very lives? Again, 15 people responded with a thumbs up. Neighbor 6. There is a great deal of irony. Most of them are hypocrites. No sign saying, "Let me adopt," or "Help pay for your child," or abortion. 5 people responded with a thumbs up to this. Neighbor 7. Wish they could keep their religion and their politics to themselves. On this type of platform, your religion should be kept to yourself. Your religious opinions should be silenced. 10 people responded with a thumbs up. Whoa! The assumptions made by this original post, that all her neighbors agreed with her right to choose perspective, made me weigh in. Many of us were silently disagreeing. But what really caught my attention was the comment that religious opinions should be silenced. Silenced? That received 10 likes. I heard shades of Bernie Sanders in that "they should be silenced" comment. It sounded similar in thought to "this nominee is really not someone this country is supposed to be about." The tide of public opinion against Christian thought is rising, even in our friendly little neighborhoods. Spine and heart. Looking back, I'm glad I went public. It encouraged others to speak out as well. But I think I could have done a little better. I had more spine than heart. I could have agreed that the pictures of aborted babies were too graphic for most children, especially those caught unaware driving by in a car without any warning or explanation. Just bang, and suddenly they are being subjected to those pictures. I think my neighbors had a point in objecting to children being so exposed. I wish I had said something like this. Yes, the pictures are huge, graphic, and maybe too much for kids. But while your concern for children is admirable, I find it ironic that your concern doesn't seem to extend to their very lives. That would have been a much better response. Spine and heart. Spine points to the truth. Heart builds a bridge that wins that truth favor. It validates someone else's perspective while still disagreeing. Our engagement with the world needs to include both. Spine engagement by itself is too often argumentative, offensive, and repulsive. Just read through Facebook to get tons of examples of this. Spine has to be served with plenty of heart to be heard and effective. I have often wondered if Russell Vought might have answered Bernie Sanders differently had Russell put his answers through a spine and heart criteria. For example, when Bernie Sanders said, referring to a piece that Vought wrote, Muslims do not simply have a deficient theology. They do not know God because they have rejected Jesus Christ, his son, and they stand condemned. He then asked Vought, do you believe that statement is Islamophobic? Russell's answer? Absolutely not, Senator. I'm a Christian, and I believe in a Christian set of principles based on my faith. Spine there, I'd say. Truth and principles. Sanders, interrupting. Forgive me, we just don't have a lot of time. Do you believe people in the Muslim religion stand condemned? Is that your view? Vought answers, Senator, I'm a Christian. Spine again. After several similar exchanges, Sanders makes his final pronouncement. I would simply say, Mr. Chairman, that this nominee is really not someone this country is supposed to be about. Maybe things would have gone differently if Vought had answered like this. Senator, Scripture says that God is not willing that any should perish. The message of Christianity is a message of love, not exclusivity. God is not willing that any should perish. Whether or not to respond to that love is each person's choice. But God desires that no one would be condemned. That is my desire and Orthodox Christianity's desire as well. Spine and heart. Here's the catch. If our Christian set of principles focuses with greater volume and velocity on side principles, if our public dialogue is caught up in current issues only, if it is only capital letters spine, it's possible the main story will be overshadowed by side issues. When we speak Christian values into current issues, gender identity, sexual preferences, abortion, we must be careful not to fall into the trap laid for us. We should have spine and refuse, as well as object to, arguments against us, labeling us haters, because we don't accept or celebrate choices that are being made. But we must, additionally, be sure our attitudes and actions are those that reflect the main story of God's love, sacrifice, and redemption for humankind. Heart. That is how we can carry the fire of God's love to our culture today. The resilient church needs to engage our secular culture with spine, redefining truth and refusing to accept false interpretations of who we are, and heart, loving in word and deed. We especially need to teach this way of engaging our secular post-Christian culture to our children. The year 2050 will require a different way of keeping the flame of Christianity burning. It will be against the tide of public opinion. There will be an effort to silence it. But unless we all want to live in a world without moral consciousness, we need to continue speaking up. Tertullian, an early church apologist, 160 to 220, imagined the best defense of faith being a good offense. He believed the Christian life, as taught in Scripture and practiced in the church, was morally superior. He imagined pagans looking at Christians and saying, "Look how they love each other," for they themselves, pagans, hate one another, and how Christians are ready to die for each other, for pagans are ready to kill each other. What if we were more loving than argumentative? What if, when we opened our mouths, the love of God came rushing forth? What if the post-Christian secular world saw how we loved each other and how we loved them? That would be fire. A friend posted this on Facebook recently. I loved the way it described social kindness. The post was titled Small Kindnesses, and it reads, I've been thinking about the way, when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull up their legs to let you go by, or how strangers still say, bless you, when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes, when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little for each other now, so far from fire and tribe. Only those brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, those fleeting temples we make together when we say, Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat. So far from fire and tribe indeed. So far from see how they love each other. I take comfort from Matthew 16:18 and how these words of Jesus to Peter have played out down through the centuries and the fearless hope it gave me about the church in the year 2050. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. KJV. What does this mean for us today? Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of secular opinion, social media, journalism, political correctness and media shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of higher education, the arrogant intellectualization of man's truth that disregards God's truth, shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of government, the laws ignoring conscience and religious freedom, shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of scientific theory, evolution, and quantum physics shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of technological secularism, the values and influence of the screen, shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of family breakdown, divorce, and fatherlessness shall not prevail against it. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of church lethargy shall not prevail against it. The church fanned the flames of the fire carriers and carried the embers to the entire world. The church, those Christ followers with spine and heart, refused to be silenced, refused to be driven underground, refused to stop carrying the fire. At great risk and sacrifice, the church spoke truth into their generations and were God's love to the world. How fearless do we dare be? Completely. The testimony of millions of believers of the centuries speaks to the power of the gospel story in our time. May we be resilient. May we be fearless. And may we carry the fire to the next generations. Essential questions. What is your story? Who carried fire to you? Beyond volunteering, what commitments could we make to the next generations? What power does the gospel story carry in our time? And finally, what cultural fear do you have that you need to believe will not prevail against it? It being God's plan. Think about these questions.